too good. Birmingham City, too good for Wrexham. That's what we're discussing on the first ever NTT20 YouTube post-match reaction live stream. Ali Maxwell, George Ellick, how you doing, friend?
Good, thanks, mate. We've spent a lot of today together in person. It's now great to be live with you to the world.
To the world. It could be. Absolutely could be. Felt like the whole world was watching tonight, didn't it? A third-tier game in English football with some big names in the building. We're not here to talk about any of that, are we? It's just sort of football for us.
Did you see that David Beckham was there? I don't know if you spotted him in the crowd.
I saw Romeo Beckham. I didn't notice David. Yeah, I mean the most sartorially elegant man in the building was Chris Davies, Birmingham City manager, who I'm pretty sure shops at one of or all of COS, APC, places like that. Looks very sharp to me, but that's just my taste. Hopefully we've got some people joining us in the chat. I think we do. What's in this video? We're going to talk about Birmingham 3, Wrexham 1. We're going to talk about how Birmingham handled an early blow going behind in the 3rd minute and turned the game around regardless. We're going to talk about Jay Stansfield being at the heart of that with Birmingham's first and second goal, cementing his status as the League One player to discuss and talk about and watch and enjoy at the moment. We're going to talk about what we thought about either side, what this game means for both sides, what the result means for them, and so do join us and get involved. Please subscribe, please like this video, and please get in the comments to let us know your thoughts. It was a hell of a start, George, after what felt like maybe the longest build-up to a match of all time. Wrexham scoring after, 2 minutes and 38 seconds. It was a classic Wrexham ball from the back into the channel. It was Ollie Palmer putting some surprising afterburners on to close down the defender who was ushering it out for a throw-in, boxing in Birmingham, and then winning the ball back, winning a corner. And what happened next was an incredible delivery, a weak punch from Peacock Farrell under pressure, and Jack Marriott smashing in to put Wrexham ahead. What did you make of the start of the game?
Yeah, it was frantic. It was chaotic. I think for Wrexham to start the way that they did and get a reward out of that with a goal early on was, it certainly injected a bit of life into the game. As you say, I think my overriding memory of tonight's game will be that Ollie Palmer is a lot faster than I thought he was, which was the case quite a few times. A few times down the left-hand side at 1-0, where it was like him and Clara having a foot race, and he would just ease to the ball. It was bizarre.
Didn't even take him that long to get going either. I saw the exact same thing that you saw, that first sprint of his, and I think I genuinely yelped. I was so excited about it. And it got me wondering what his pace stat on Football Manager is, because in my head, he was like a 7 or an 8. Now I've got him up with sort of 12, 13s maybe.
Yeah, at the least. And yeah, I mean, it was relatively weak goalkeeping. I mean, I think Peacock Farrell in goal gives you a lot of things. Dominance from balls dropped over his head probably aren't one of those things. And it was the kind of weak punch you probably wouldn't see from a lot of keepers. But then I guess he makes saves and he's better on the ball than a few other keepers at the level too. So it was a massive start for them. At the risk of going fully cliche, I've never seen a team where scoring too early has been more apt than this time around, because I think going into the game we kind of knew that Parky would set up Wrexham to going there would be very happy with a draw. They took the game to them early on. They had their best spell of the game without actually creating anything was probably the 10 minutes after the goal, so the first 15 minutes generally where they were pretty good. But it was going to be impossible for them to defend a lead playing that way for over 90 minutes, given they scored after 2 minutes. And naturally, they kind of retreated deeper and deeper and deeper and allowed Birmingham to dictate the play, to grow into their game. And I think it was, by the time Birmingham had scored the equaliser, they were the way the game was going was so entrenched, it was going to be impossible for them to get out of it. I'd have been very interested to see what had happened had Wrexham not scored so early. I feel like as a contest, it would have been a lot closer, because it's easy to forget how close the first 15 minutes were. But obviously
What's weird
what
is
came
that
next was total dominance.
they've scored early in a couple of games so far this season. Well, 4 times in the first half an hour of games already. Never quite as early as this, and clearly never away at a Birmingham side who have such quality and who look to dominate in possession and in territory in a more extreme way than any other team at this level. I mean, in those previous games, they have generally gone on to score the second goal as well, and they haven't had this sense of needing to protect what they have had and been somewhat paralysed by it, which is kind of what it feels like you're kind of alluding happened this evening. I guess maybe the key factor is not so much what Wrexham didn't do having gone ahead, but the fact that the flow of the game was always likely to, the momentum was always likely to swing Birmingham's way at some point, whether they scored or not. And in fairness to Birmingham, without necessarily creating a huge amount inside Wrexham's box in the first half, they did have a fantastic amount of territory, and they were able to keep the pressure on to an amazing extent with their possession, but also with how good they were getting onto the second balls. Whenever Wrexham cleared it, it went to a Birmingham player and they started again. And I just think that Wrexham looked absolutely exhausted by the end of that first half, even though they had done a pretty good job of, as we said, defending their own box. Just the one goal, the equaliser from Stansfield, an unfortunate parry from Okonkwo falling at his feet.
Yeah, this is the third time that Birmingham have gone behind in a game. They went behind on opening day against Reading, where they came back and drew 1-1. They went behind against Wickham, again they won 3-2. And they went behind again tonight. So they've picked up 7 points from the 3 games where they've gone behind, which is obviously a pretty good haul. And I think it kind of makes sense that would be the case. Yes, I would say real quality in both of Birmingham's second 2 goals. And the move to get the ball to May's feet was pretty good. I mean, we couldn't really see with the angle that we had whether it was a deft touch from Stansfield to get the ball into Williamson, or whether it was just a block from the defender. But I think that goes down, I would say, as a bad save from Okonkwo. It was a save that he should really either push away from goal or catch. Like, it was not particularly, it was well struck, but it wasn't in the corner. It was in his kind of area where he should be doing better with it. I'm sure he would agree. And it's a strange one because he is, and I know that you're in particular a massive fan of his, but he's someone who, like quite a lot of the Birmingham squad, probably shouldn't be playing in League One. Probably if he hadn't had the loan spell at Wrexham last season and Wrexham won Wrexham, he probably wouldn't be in League One this season. He'd be playing in the Championship at the very least. And he is so dependable and such a safe pair of hands generally. But this is the second time that Wrexham have played live on TV, and he's made a massive howler, the last coming in the FA Cup last season. So there's an irony that he's playing for Hollywood FC, but seems to only save his errors when he's playing on TV, because it was poor. Realistically, it was poor. And I do think I messaged you at half time and said, I kind of feel like I'm watching a different game to the commentary here, where all the talk is about Birmingham turning the screw, but it felt to me like they basically had a lot of the ball between halfway and the penalty box, which they were allowed to do by Wrexham. And yet whenever the ball came near the box, Wrexham were very happy to defend their box really well. And I said it will come down to either individual quality from distance or individual errors that will create the goals. And it turned out that it was one unbelievable cross and one very well placed long shot that got Birmingham in front.
Yeah, that's right. At half time, looking at the way that the game had panned out, on the one hand, I felt that if Birmingham could continue their territorial dominance and basically just wear Wrexham out while not allowing them any spells, then the second goal felt like it could come. How it would come, I wasn't so clear on, because they hadn't succeeded in really being able to force any play through the middle. And you can see with the double pivot that they have, who like to stay very narrow and give passing options in the midfield. That's Iwata and Paik. But also, you've got May playing in a number 10 role, you've got Stansfield in a number 9 role, you've got Williamson nominally sort of playing on the right side of the 3 behind the striker. All of those players trying to be fluid in their movement, but generally trying to get on the ball in central areas where they can be most dangerous. And it hadn't quite worked, which meant that in the first half, Birmingham had ended up putting in 20 crosses, and only 2 of them had reached a Birmingham player or had been completed. And so that was kind of how I felt in the set at half time, was like, are Wrexham maybe quite happy if Birmingham's attacks end with them slinging the balls into the box? I felt that that was the case, but we didn't reckon for one of the biggest moments of quality of the whole game, which was Cochrane, the Birmingham left back, who, when they build up, ends up being sort of in a back three, really, in the left centre back role, with Hansen, the left winger, holding the width. And you can see, if I share my screen for a second, you can see, looking at the FOTMob stats on the game, that this is a guy who, if we're looking at passing stats for this game, Cochrane has the most touches of any player on the pitch. He has to play 98 passes, which is slightly fewer than Bielik, who's that kind of anchor at the very base of the team. But he's the one that's playing 20 passes into the final third. He's the one playing 10 crosses, of which only 2 were completed, but one of them clearly breaking the game open and putting it into Birmingham's favour. So it's quite interesting to me that this is Birmingham's left back, but in many ways, you kind of have to say, in this game, he was their main playmaker from deep areas. He was the one that had the most time and space on the ball, and his quality was probably, easy to say with hindsight, always going to dictate the game. And he did end up with that moment of incredible quality. But what was interesting to me, George, is that your response to Stansfield's goal to make it 2-1 was, F me, that's a good header. And I replied saying, F me, that's a good cross. So what was it about the header that was so gorgeous for you?
I think it's a really difficult skill to basically, it's like a stooping header back across goal. So it's not one where you're kind of directing it in a certain direction. You almost have to kind of let it hit your head, which I think is in itself difficult when you consider that Stansfield was running in behind a 6'5" centre back who the ball had just eluded the top of his head. That basically means that Stansfield was unsighted for the most part. So he's had to anticipate, both with the run, anticipate where the ball's going to go, but also anticipate where the ball's coming over the head of the defender, which he did both of which unbelievably well. It's one of those headers where you see it live and you're like, yeah, fair enough. He's got to tell him the ball 6 yards out, you expect him to score. But actually, when you watch it back, I think it was all the more impressive. I thought he was really good. I mean, there's a lot of scrutiny around his transfer, which I think is fair enough, given the fee. And there was a moment, it was interesting, because I said on the pod when we first spoke about it, I kind of worried for him a little bit in terms of, around all the noise about the transfer fee and the most expensive player in League One. Another thing is he is a young footballer who, should be allowed to progress, and just because he scored 13 goals in the Championship last season doesn't mean we should just anticipate him to come in and blitz it this season. And he came to the side first up in the EFL Trophy in that game that they drew against Walsall, and today, his first touch on the touchline, he kind of fell over the ball and it went out of play, and you're thinking, okay, we don't want this to happen. But he was superb throughout the game. I thought his movement was so good. His ability to peel off the last man and find space either out on the right-hand side or running in between the defenders meant that he's very hard to pick up. He is obviously very cool with his finishing, with his, whether it was following up with the first goal. As I say, a brilliant header for the second. Okonkwo made a good save to deny him his hat-trick.
Even that chance, his control on his chest from this high spinning looping ball, I cannot believe how good that was. To be able to take that touch and be in a position to get a shot away within a split second, incredible. And it's the technical side, isn't it? The first touches, it's the movement, the speed of the first few yards of movement, that acceleration, that little burst, and then again, it's kind of the psychological side of the game where he looks so comfortable in those situations, which, particularly when you're at this level in League One or in League Two, you are rarely finding players who are inherently comfortable in tight goal-scoring situations while also having the pace and the movement and the energy that he has.
Yeah, and it's also interesting. I've wondered a lot about how they're going to wedge him and Alfie May in the same team, because they are different players, but they are quite similar physical profiles, and that neither of them are particularly well. They're both short. They're not very strong. They both have a pretty direct on the ball in terms of what they do with it, and they're both goal scorers and good finishers. I've seen kind of different interpretations of how they play today, where it's being spoken about as if May was a 10 and Stansfield was a striker, and I guess that was kind of it. But it was very fluid. If you actually look at their touch map, both of them, or their you can see the dots where they've touched the ball, or the heat map. May is very much left side focused in terms of where he was touching the ball, and Stansfield very much on the right hand side. And it feels like it was almost like a lopsided shape where they could both kind of intermittently flip between them. Now that has Stansfield very much on the right hand side, but you can see there where May's getting on the ball the most. If you look on Stansfield as well, it's kind of on the right channel when he's not in the box. So with Clara, and I mean their whole back line is obviously very comfortable in possession, but with Clara so happy to get on the ball in that right sided area, meaning that Gardner Hickman can basically play as a right winger, it kind of enables Stansfield to take up a position on that right hand side where needed, but also as a striker, and then the same on the left hand side where it kind of feels like they can be really fluid in terms of what they're doing. And my concern with Birmingham going into today was that whilst we'd seen a lot of kind of very pretty patterns of passing play, I wasn't really sure if there was some of the most tactically diverse teams we've seen. You watch them, you can see areas where they're doing things a bit differently, and today I thought that was the case. Like I thought, especially the second half, their movement and the way that the players seemingly knew their jobs and they were able to find space where necessary was really impressive. So I definitely, I mean, there will be tougher assignments to come. For no disrespect to Wrexham at all, but there will be teams who give Birmingham a much more difficult game than they had in the second half today, and they already have been this season, frankly. But I was impressed with this in the second half today, and it's improvement, which is to be expected. Now, this is Chris Davis's first job as a manager. This is a completely new side playing together, and I think we're seeing now what this side could be.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth pointing out that Wrexham, in terms of defending in the last 20 yards, are one of the strongest teams in League One, and it wasn't easy for Birmingham to crack that nut, but they were able to, really through moments of individual quality. There will be teams where it's the team itself that is creating the chances, and they will have the individual quality to give them that bit extra, that X factor. And so the reason I'm feeling really good about Birmingham at the moment is I think that the way that they play, the depth of their squad, where you've got players out injured today, some very, very good players like Ethan Laird, who would have made their performance even better, I believe, had he been playing in the Gardner Hickman role. Not that Gardner Hickman had a poor game by any means, but I think given the amount of time he spent on the ball, basically in a right wing role, having someone like Laird who's got that attacking ability that's kind of above the level for a fullback would have helped a lot. It's just the fact that I also think that the way that they play, the committing of so many bodies forward, the quality in possession in tight areas and the composure for the most part means that teams playing against them are going to become exhausted. And we haven't seen it that much yet in terms of their results. They obviously got a late winner against Wigan. Otherwise, most of their scoring has been done earlier on in games. But I do think that we will see more and more regularly, if they are not in front with half an hour to go, that there probably will also be lots of games where they come back and score late. So I'm feeling pretty good about things, if I'm honest, when it comes to Blues at the moment, while acknowledging that particularly in the first half, like that they weren't absolutely incredible in the final moment with the final pass and inside Wrexham's box. The third goal, Iwata with it. Tomoki Iwata, who they signed from Celtic on deadline day. This is the sort of move that got really obscured by Stansfield transfer having been completed afterwards. But this is the kind of move that if Stansfield's move hadn't happened and they had this current squad without him, like Iwata would possibly be the player with the biggest caliber of the whole squad, not only having come from Celtic, where he never quite managed to get past Callum McGregor and Matt O'Reilly, which is no shame in that, given the quality of those players, McGregor's importance to Celtic as a club, and O'Reilly's clear quality that saw him get a move to Brighton. They were kind of in front of Iwata for a lot of his time at Celtic. But in 2022, he won the MVP award in the J-League in Japan's top flight, which is a fairly strong division and has exported some sensational players into European football recently. So he might not be Jay Stansfield, and this would have been a lot better to say before he scored a worldie to make it 3-1 to Birmingham. I'd have looked a lot smarter if I'd said it previously. But he's another player that just should not necessarily be playing in League One, but is going to be great to watch. And his partnership with Pike, who is a little bit bigger, possibly a little bit sturdier, but I think Iwata has a little bit more about him on the ball with what he can do technically. They look like if they can keep developing that partnership in the centre of the park, they're going to give Blues an awful lot as well. So a lot to enjoy, a lot to talk about. We are going to run through a couple of comments now. Feels like the sort of thing where I should have possibly vetted them before I started going through them.
Mark just said first 10 minutes were awful, and I thought he was talking about the live stream, but it turns out he's talking about the game. Pure class, and we're only going to get better. And I don't disagree with him.
Yeah, we've got Chris, who I assume is a Wrexham fan, who says Birmingham far too good for this league. Can't complain, as they were like we were in the conference against other teams. I always like someone who is still calling it the conference rather than the National League. So well done, Chris. Danny's point here: do you fear if Birmingham continue to go behind, it will eventually catch up with them? I'm not that concerned that they will continue to go behind. They obviously have done in 3 of their first 5 league games, which I accept is not an ideal trend. They've been done in previous games on the counter-attack. In this game, it was obviously a set-piece situation. I'm not particularly concerned that trend will continue, and I think we saw tonight that if it does continue, they will be fairly well equipped to be the sort of team that can come roaring back in games. We should have been more aggressive and more angry, George, because as Chris says, NTT20 fuming that Blues won. Love to see it. There's a lot of Chris's in the world, and there's a lot of Chris's that support Birmingham, but somehow I know exactly which Chris that is as well, which is nice. When you've been doing this for 8 years, you do get to know people. And lastly, Dean, Sofa Scorer and not FOTMob. Look, Dean, you don't need me to tell you that FOTMob is the #1 football app, and we are very proud that they sponsor a segment on our Monday podcast. However, they do not sponsor the YouTube channel, and
yet,
as I will be talking to them about when we have developed our relationship a little bit further, the one thing that SofaScore has that FOTMob doesn't have are those average touch maps, and I don't know how it works, but I don't see any reason why we can't get FOTMob to adopt that feature. So if that's the main thing that comes from our partnership with them, I will be pretty happy. Any issues with Wrexham's style of play, George? If I was being harsh, I would say at times it looked like kick and rush. And I know it's not easy to play against a team like this away from home, but there were times where I thought, lads, you've got good players too, you know?
I don't know. I'm willing to basically draw a line through tonight when it comes to Wrexham and their style of play. I thought for 50 minutes they gave a very good account of themselves, and then they were just totally outclassed. And as I say, I think game state didn't help them at all, where there came a point where they were naturally going to retreat and sit in because they had something to protect. And I'm not overly concerned by it. They've been brilliant against teams who are also good League One teams over the last few weeks, and I anticipate that they'll have much easier games than today. And I also think they'll beat good teams this season, as they already have done too. So, I'm sure Wrexham fans travelling home will wish that they were able to, especially having been pegged back, maybe come out in the second half and being a bit better. But there are going to be a lot of teams who find it very difficult to gain any kind of initiative. I thought one thing I would say is it felt like Wrexham kind of deliberately tried to get Birmingham get a man sent off, and that worked. And then they had a better time in the last 10 minutes, and that was quite clever.
Yeah, the one thing that this occasion, there was more than a match, wasn't it, that this occasion was missing, was a fight or a scuffle, and we got that near the end. So I was pleased about that. It was like surprisingly aggressive for what it needed to be. And as you say, it did have the effect of Christian Bielik picking up a yellow card for scrapping. And then while he was still pretty angry, as was shown with him continuing to offer James McLean out for a good minute or so afterwards, he then flew into a challenge and took out Andy Cannon for a second yellow. Him missing the Rotherham game, not ideal when he is a big, strong defender, and that is what you need to counteract Rotherham's kind of big, strong manner of attacking. So not very smart from him. But I did enjoy the scuffle. I always enjoy a little scuffle, as long as it doesn't go too far. On that note, someone did ask, Tom, in fact, I think that might be a pen name for Luis Suarez, Because the question is, ever been so angry on a pitch you've been tempted to bite someone? Mr. Paul Mullin thought about it, didn't he? Thought about a nibble, and then, if to the extent that you can pull out of a nibble, Paul Mullin pulled out of a nibble. That should be the title of the video, really, shouldn't it? That was pretty random.
I think Paul Mullin's mouth would have tasted like salt for a while, because he really went in quite close to his shin and pressed his lips against the calf, and then thought about sinking his teeth in, and then suddenly thought, you know what, this will be a great way to absolutely destroy my reputation and career on a game which is probably watched by more people than any game I've ever played in, to come off the bench and bite someone in the leg. So instead, he kind of stood up and made quite a big thing about how he felt like he'd been kicked in the head. It was weird. It was bizarre. He then got booked after the scrap. He should have been booked in the scrap. He got booked after the scrap for carrying on scrapping and complaining. I'd never been close to biting anyone ever. No, is my answer to that. I'm also wary that people are saying that I'm very quiet, so I'm now talking quite loudly into the mic, so I hope that's a bit better. No, never. The scrap was quite funny. I mean, it was I would say a lot more leery than most football scraps, where it felt like Keshi Anderson definitely went in with some like real I'm late to a fight outside of club energy, and looked like he could have had a swing. James McLean, as you'd expect, came in out of absolutely nowhere, running incredibly fast towards the scrap in order to get involved. It felt like there was a jab in there somewhere from someone. I couldn't really see who it was. It felt like a bit of a proper fight, and I really loved it. And then the camera cut to Tom Brady looking really smug, doing this weird like slow clap, and it suddenly made the whole thing really performative, and I hated everything about it and felt dirty.
Well, thanks for getting his name in there just for SEO purposes. We wanted to make sure we talked about the football, because there was a lot of not football chat around this game, and that's not necessarily what we're in for. Before we go, and please do like and subscribe to the channel. I just want to share a couple of things that made me chuckle during this game, because football should be enjoyed, and sometimes it's easy to forget that. Tom, who's on NTT20 squad, shared the fact that very early on in the game, when they were talking about the atmosphere and the attendance, the commentator said, "You've got to pinch yourself and remind yourself this is League One football," just as someone scuffed a long ball directly out of play for a throw-in. As good a comedy bit of timing as anything Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have done. Don Goodman also replying to Seb saying Wrexham need half-time, just replied by going, big style. And I think that's a new favourite phrase for the pod, big style. And I also really enjoyed poor Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who very much slipped as he flew through James McLean and picked up a yellow card. And his reaction to cleaning out James McLean, rather than deciding to go stiff upper lip and getting ready for the shoulder to shoulder, was to do basically the in-betweeners, like, oh, sorry. Yeah. He absolutely wet himself. And I can't blame him, because I'm pretty confident I would have done the exact same thing in that situation. Any final words, George?
No, just that thanks everyone for watching. You're all incredible people. Sleep well.